In the state of Pará, Brazil, an explosive phenomenon transformed the last decades of the 20th century into a veritable spectacle of greed and despair. The discovery of gold in Serra Pelada. What began as a simple quest for fortune quickly became an insane race, leading thousands into devastating chaos, full of destruction, tragedies, and massacres. Today on Bello Mundo, you'll explore the dark history of a region that was supposed to be synonymous with wealth and prosperity, but in reality became a symbol of blood and suffering. If there's one thing that's not new in Brazil, it's the history of illegal mining devastating entire regions. Recently, the humanitarian crisis faced by the Yanomami people in the states of Amazonas and Roraima in the northern region of Brazil shook the world and exposed the terrible damage that illegal mining causes to the largest rainforest on the planet, leaving a trail of destruction that should always be remembered. But it's not just these two states that are in this fight. One of the biggest stages for these tragedies is undoubtedly the vast state of Pará. And if there's one place that symbolizes everything that's bad about this story, it's Serra Pelada. For those who don't know it yet, Serra Pelada is an open-pit mining site located in Curionópolis, approximately 5 hours from Belém, the capital of the state of Pará. What was once a hill of 150 meters has today become an impacting crater of 24,000 square meters, with depths varying between 70 and 80 meters, transformed into a mercury-contaminated lake. From the start of activities until the official closure in 1992, it is estimated that approximately 45 tons of gold were extracted from there. And what does that mean? While a few got rich, nature and the surrounding communities paid a very high price. There are many legends surrounding the discovery of gold in Serra Pelada. The most widely accepted version says that a man called Genésio Ferreira da Silva, a former landowner in the region, found a nugget weighing 13 kilos while digging a hole to install a fence at the end of the 1970s. The news spread like wildfire through dry straw. In a matter of days, the region became a magnet, attracting thousands of men in search of fortune. 5 weeks after this revelation, around 3,000 dreamers were already there, all with their heads in the clouds and their eyes shining with promises of wealth. And it didn't take long for Serra Pelada's fame to spread throughout Brazil and beyond. What had once been a small riverside community was flooded with migrants from all over, all chasing the golden dream. In the first half of 1980, Serra Pelada already had 5,000 miners, mainly from the northeast. The first excavations were rudimentary, but as the number of miners grew, exploration became more and more intense. What began as a simple mining activity quickly turned into a real fever, with thousands of men transforming the land into a real battlefield. Mining expanded, creating chaos that attracted more and more prospectors, each believing that they could be the next to find gold nuggets. And that dream soon turned into a nightmare. The workings of the mining were, at first glance, simple, but the reality behind them was much harsher. It all started with the sale of the ravines, areas of 3 by 2 meters that could cost a small fortune. The hope of finding nuggets weighing up to 60 kilos fueled the dream of great fortune. Inside each ravine, a team of 10 to 15 men were divided into specific tasks. There was the digger, the filler, and the ants, who were responsible for carrying the earth out. Everyone played their part, united in the search for the hidden treasure. Over time, whoever found the most nuggets was able to acquire more ravines, and the cycle began again. To maintain order in this frenzy, the foreman circulated, supervising and recording all the activities. Making matters worse, the workers had no adequate protection. Without special footwear or appropriate clothing, they were covered in mud, carrying sacks weighing up to 30 kilos. The most curious thing is that all this was supposed to be provided by the owners of the ravines. But as you can imagine, nothing was actually delivered. A common practice when hiring garimpeiros was to split the profits. This meant that the workers didn't receive a fixed payment, but a share of whatever they found. This situation is very similar to what happens in La Rinconada, a remote place in Peru. In addition to all the difficulties of mining, there is a brutal reality where human sacrifices even take place. We have a video on this subject here on our channel that tells you all the details about this desperate place on Earth. So, after this one, be sure to check it out. In addition to all these life-threatening events, the working conditions were equally alarming. The workers faced grueling days under the scorching sun, climbing up and down steep slopes without any safety. The work was risky and the lack of adequate equipment was a constant. Many were forced to work in unhealthy conditions in search of small nuggets of gold, which, more often than not, were not worth the effort. The journey began before dawn and lasted well into the night. Armed with simple tools such as shovels and picks, they dug into the earth, while the scarcity of drinking water made everything even more difficult. Hygiene conditions were precarious, and the risk of disease was always present. Many workers ended up in makeshift accommodation, where privacy and security were only a distant dream. With the arrival of so many prospectors, a makeshift town sprang up in the middle of the forest. What used to be just tarpaulin and wooden shacks soon became a rudimentary urban structure with restaurants, markets, and even brothels. And look how curious. The mining site belonged to Companhia Vale do Rio Doce, which was unable to exploit anything. It even tried, but didn't have the strength to win any of the battles it fought. Just to give you an idea, during the first half of 1980, the number of people arriving went on and on. The manual mining already had around 20,000 people squeezing into the ravines at the same time. The government, for its part, found it difficult to enforce Vale do Rio Doce's rights to extract any minerals in the area, as there was a crowd of armed miners. The golden dream couldn't be tainted with blood, could it? And then something unexpected happened. On November 12, 1980, Serra Pelada was visited by President Juan Batista Figueiredo. The president was awaited by a crowd of prospectors who greeted him warmly, sang the national anthem during the raising of the Brazilian flag, and listened attentively to his speech. At the time, there was growing concern among the workers about the possibility of losing the manual gold mining concession to large mining companies. But instead of banning mining, he was smarter. He simply nationalized everything. With the nationalization, a series of agencies were set up in Serra Pelada, such as the Federal Police, the Federal Revenue Service, the Post Office, and the Caixa Econômica Bank. Thus, a city was born which, in reality, wasn't really a city. Gold could only be sold at the Caixa Econômica branch, allowing the government to control the price of the metal and collect taxes. To handle the gold mined, the central bank in Brasilia built a special vault to receive the tons of molten metal, which now had a new home. But, as expected, things didn't go so well. As the situation deteriorated, the government decided to intervene, sending in the army to control the chaos in Serra Pelada. Along with this, a military interventor was appointed, Sebastião Rodrigues de Moura, better known as Major Curio. Curio's mission was clear: to control the mining and impose rules. He banned the entry of women, drugs, weapons, and drink, allowing only registered prospectors to access the area. Over time, the area was renamed Curionópolis and became a municipality. But hold on to that name. We'll talk about it in a moment. Still, even with all the prohibitions, crime linked to the illegal sale of gold continued to be a problem. Extreme violence became a sad constant, with around 80 murders recorded every month. The number of workers in search of gold skyrocketed. From 20,000, it jumped to an impressive 116,000 ants, as those who, from sun up to sundown, carried bags of up to 30 kilos of clay on their shoulders were called. Faced with this grim scenario, no one wanted to take on the hot potato. The solution found by the government was to try to close down the mining by any means possible, but the complexities of the situation made this an almost impossible task. The first attempt to close down the mining activity in Serra Pelada took place in 1982. On that occasion, President Figueiredo set the date for the closure of the deposit in order to avoid wear and tear, establishing that the closure would take place on November 15, 1983. However, political articulations ensured that the withdrawal of gold continued for another 5 years after the stipulated date. In 1984, the Cooperativa de Mineração dos Garimpeiros de Serra Pelada was created, holding the rights to exploit 100 hectares. And who was one of the main people responsible for this? The famous Major Curio. He not only helped found the cooperative, but also became its president. However, the atmosphere was already beginning to smell of tragedy, and everyone could sense that the situation was about to get complicated. During the 12 years that the manual mining in Serra Pelada was in operation, the torrential rains of the Amazon rainforest caused several interruptions in activities. The first big downpour happened in January of 1981, and the damage was immense. But, as they say, miners are persistent, so they learn to hang up their picks and wait for better times. In October of the same year, another accident interrupted the work. The collapse of a barrier, along with the onset of the rains, closed the mining until April of 1982. Luckily, no one lost their lives this time, but the situation was already beginning to show how dangerous the site was. In 1983, the lack of safety became evident. A column of earth collapsed, tragically taking the lives of 16 workers. It was a clear sign that conditions in the human anthill were critical. And it didn't stop there. In October of 1986, another accident shocked the community. With around 300 miners working, the situation became dramatic when 10 men were buried under 40 tons of earth. But it wasn't just natural tragedies that marked this dark period. The search for gold in Serra Pelada was about to reveal an even darker side to the story. As the government's presence diminished, the situation in Serra Pelada became increasingly tense. Starting in 1985, the demonstrations began to grow. The workers, tired of the precarious situation, urgently demanded that the government drain the water that had accumulated between the ravines and lower the ground. To get to their workplaces, they had to face almost 200 steps on makeshift ladders. In the following months, police violence became routine. In October of 1986, a worker was murdered by an officer inside the main pit. The community was outraged and retaliated by burning down the police barracks and the headquarters of the Prospectors Association. The drain was put in the hole, but the worst was yet to come. And it was in this cauldron of revolt that the Serra Pelada massacre took place in December of 1987. On that fateful day, protesting miners were cornered on the Marabá Highway Bridge. Under the command of the governor of Pará, Hélio Gueiros, the military police set up an ambush and opened fire on more than 300 people occupying the bridge, a crucial point for Vale's iron ore traffic. Among them were miners, women, young people, and children, all innocent. To escape the gunfire, many threw themselves from a height of 76 meters into the Tocantins River. With the water level low and the rocks exposed, many lost their lives, and their bodies were never found. The official death toll has never been confirmed. While the government initially mentioned 2 deaths and then increased it to 9, reports indicate that between 50 and 79 people disappeared. These horror stories are documented in the book Encurralados na Ponte, o Massacre dos Garimpeiros de Serra Pelada by Paulo Roberto Ferreira. Many families are still looking for news of their loved ones who have disappeared since that tragic day. The end of mining in Serra Pelada came almost 5 years after the massacre on the bridge and various other confrontations in the region. In 1992, President Fernando Collor de Mello, the one who confiscated the savings of thousands of Brazilians, decided to close the mine and had the drainage machines removed. As a result, groundwater and rainwater began to flood what had once been home to thousands of people. The area was then transferred to Vale do Rio Doce, which was state-owned at the time. The company destroyed houses with tractors and closed irregular gold mining holes. However, the story of Serra Pelada was far from over. In 2001, the federal Senate recognized the prospectors' rights over the area, but Vale didn't accept this easily. Amid lawsuits and legal disputes in 2007, the company ended up giving the workers' cooperative the right to exploit the mine in a consortium with the Canadian company Colossus. Good news, right? But here's an interesting detail. Remember Colonel Curio's cooperative? It was back. The Canadian company disbursed more than $70,000 a month to the Serra Pelada Mining Cooperative, with the obligation to pass on the money to its 40,000 members. However, this never happened, and it is estimated that around $10 million were embezzled, possibly enriching Captain Curio and his partners. Unfortunately, Curio died without being held responsible for these actions. However, in 2008, he was impeached and ordered to pay around $180,000 for acts of administrative impropriety that took place between 2001 and 2004, during his first term as mayor. After his impeachment, Curio withdrew from politics and moved to Brasilia and never faced the appropriate consequences. The idea of resuming gold extraction in Serra Pelada arose in 2014, but was soon lost amid layoffs and endless bureaucracy. Today, the workers who remained are waiting for compensation from the federal government for the closure of the mining activities. Around 6,000 people still live in what was once the largest open-pit gold mine, dealing with the consequences of a history marked by promises of wealth and devastation. And that concludes our journey through Serra Pelada. And did you know this story? Let us know in the comments. Which part impressed you the most? If you enjoyed discovering the secrets and twists and turns of this remarkable past and want to continue exploring other intense stories, stay tuned for the next videos and turn on the notifications so you don't miss anything new from our Bello Mundo. Thanks for following us here and see you next time.